The sky was a dull gray, filled with the kind of clouds that foretold a storm. But it wasn't rain that was coming. No one had expected it. The sirens, at first, seemed like a drill. There had been rumors, whispers of strange signals intercepted by satellite stations, but nothing conclusive. The global powers had dismissed them, certain that it was just another technological glitch. That was, until the sky tore open. It started with one ship, a gleaming dark shape that appeared without warning, falling from the heavens like a hammer. Then another, and another. Within minutes, the sky was full of them, vast fleets of alien warships, each the size of a city block, each bristling with weapons that humanity had never imagined. They were here, and they were ready to annihilate. In the Pentagon's underground command center, chaos erupted. Generals barked orders into radios, civilians screamed, and thousands of screens flashed data that made no sense. The world had just become a war zone. From Earth's surface, the alien ships looked like invincible behemoths, hovering silently above cities, their glowing underbellies shimmering ominously. Across the world, people had no time to react. The first strike came at noon, just after the morning news had promised that the day would be uneventful. The Zephyr warships released their payloads, beams of brilliant white-hot energy that turned skyscrapers into molten ruins in seconds. One by one, major cities fell. New York, Paris, Tokyo, London. The devastation was immediate and absolute. On Earth's last line of defense, the United Earth Fleet scrambled to launch a counterattack. Elena Carter stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring at the endless black void where humanity's fate would be decided. The warship had once been a symbol of human strength, a technological marvel. But now, as the alien ships moved closer, it seemed laughably outclassed. Their weapons were far superior, faster, more destructive. The humans' best hope lay in defying the inevitable. "Captain, the Zephyr fleet has initiated orbital bombardment," reported Lieutenant Lee, his voice steady but betraying a hint of fear. "They're targeting military bases, communication hubs, all the major defense points." Elena's jaw clenched. "I know. We're not going down without a fight." "Ready all weapons," she ordered, her voice cutting through the tension. "Target their lid ship and fire on my command." The crew scrambled, working with precision born of countless hours of training. A moment of stillness passed, then came the hum of power building through the ship's systems. Elena gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white. The Vanguard trembled under her feet as it powered up its cannons. Firing. The helmsman's voice rang out, and the ship's guns roared to life, launching a barrage of plasma rounds toward the Zephyr flagship. For a fleeting moment, Elena allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, humanity had a chance. But the moment of hope was short-lived. The Zephyr flagship's shields flared to life and absorbed the incoming fire with barely a flicker. A secondary barrage from the fleet's smaller ships rained down on the Vanguard, shattering its outer hull. The bridge lights flickered, and the crew was thrown off their feet. Elena's eyes went wide as she watched the Zephyr ships release another salvo, this one aimed directly at Earth's atmosphere. There was no escaping it. She was watching the end of civilization. "Captain, they've launched surface missiles," Lieutenant Lee gasped, eyes wide. "Earth is going to burn." A rumble shook the ship as the first missiles impacted Earth's surface, sending shockwaves through the planet. From the bridge of the Vanguard, Elena could see the distant flashes of explosions across the globe. A city here, a city there, vanishing in a blink. Her heart pounded in her chest. Her mind raced for a solution, but the truth was undeniable. Humanity was losing, and fast. The cold reality settled over her like a heavy cloak. "Initiate evasive maneuvers," Elena shouted. Her crew scrambled to follow orders, but the ship was damaged, its systems flickering and unstable. As the Vanguard turned, barely avoiding another round of fire, Elena felt a crushing weight of helplessness. "We're not giving up," she whispered under her breath, barely loud enough for herself to hear. There was a flicker of defiance in her eyes. But even as they retreated into the deep void of space, Alina knew that Earth, the cradle of humanity, was lost. All she could do now was fight, and pray that the human spirit would not be so easily extinguished. The Vanguard limped into the darkness of space, leaving behind a dying world. The Vanguard drifted in the cold emptiness of space, a wounded animal with no home to return to. Alina Carter stood on the bridge, staring out at the void, her mind numb with the weight of Earth's destruction. The ship's crew moved like ghosts, their faces hollow from the horror they had just witnessed. They had escaped, but the cost was unimaginable. Earth, their planet, was gone, and with it, everything they had known. The survivors were all that remained. "Captain," Lieutenant Lee said, his voice barely audible as he approached Alina's command chair. "We've received an encrypted message from the Resistance. They found something that could help." Alina looked up, her eyes sharpening. "What do you mean?" "An artifact, Captain," Lee replied. "One of the scientists on the ground found something that could potentially turn the tide. But we need to get to them before the Zethar do." Alina's pulse quickened. It was a glimmer of hope in a galaxy of despair, but she couldn't afford to get her hopes up. "Where is it?" "In the Arctic, near the ruins of an old military base," Lee answered. "It's buried deep within the ice, but our scanners have picked up an unusual energy signature. The Zethar haven't yet discovered it, but they're closing in on the location." Alina thought for a moment, weighing the risk. "We're running on fumes," she muttered. "But if this artifact is what they say it is, it could be the one thing that can give us a fighting chance. Get us a course, Lieutenant. We're going to the Arctic." The journey to the Arctic was a silent one. The Vanguard gliding through space with barely any power, its hull damaged from the earlier assault. The crew had little to work with. No resources, no reinforcements, but they had something the Zethar didn't: humanity's will to survive. As they neared Earth's icy pole, the team prepared for the worst. Alina's mind kept returning to the image of Earth burning, and she couldn't shake the feeling that it was all her fault. She had been in charge, and now so many were dead. Approaching target, Lieutenant Lee's voice broke through her thoughts. "We'll be landing soon." The Vanguard touched down on the frozen tundra with a soft thud. Alina didn't wait for the landing gear to fully lock into place before she stood. "Suit up," she ordered the crew. "We've got work to do." The air was bitterly cold as Alina, Lee, and a small team of scientists and engineers stepped onto the snow-covered wasteland. The Zethar hadn't reached this far yet, but their scouts were known to be ruthless. Every second counted. They trekked through the snow, their boots crunching with each step, following the coordinates provided by the Resistance. The base, a relic from the Cold War era, was barely recognizable, half buried under layers of ice and snow. The entrance, long since sealed, was covered with thick sheets of frozen metal, but the human team wasted no time. They set to work immediately, using salvaged equipment to cut through the ice. "Shouldn't take long," one of the engineers said, his breath misting in the frigid air. "It's an old military lock, but with some effort, we can get through." Minutes later, the thick metal door groaned as it began to open, revealing the dim interior of the facility. Inside, it was deathly quiet, abandoned for decades. Dust and rust covered everything, but there, in the center of the room, was a strange object. An orb, pulsing with an eerie blue light. It seemed to hum with energy, as though it were alive. "Is this it?" Alina whispered, stepping closer to the artifact. Her heart raced as she felt its power radiating, unlike anything she had ever felt before. The scientists gathered around it, scanning it with every tool they had. "Yes, Captain," one of them said, his voice trembling. This is beyond anything we've seen. It's not human-made. It could be alien tech, or something older than the Zethar themselves." Alina reached out, her fingers hovering just above the orb. She felt a strange pull, an instinctive connection. "We need to get this back to the Vanguard," she said, voice firm with authority. Now, as they gathered the artifact and began to leave the facility, Alina's comms suddenly buzzed to life. "Captain, we've detected Zithar units inbound. They're not far. We need to move fast." The hum of engines filled the air, and in the distance, the familiar silhouette of Zithar scouts appeared, cutting through the snowy horizon like predators sensing their prey. Alina's heart pounded as she made a split-second decision. "Get to the ship. Now," she shouted. The team rushed back through the snow, the Zithar closing in, their ships cutting across the sky like vultures. Alina's breath came in sharp bursts, her mind calculating escape routes. If the artifact worked, it could change everything. But if the Zithar got their hands on it first, humanity's hope would be snuffed out forever. As they reached the Vanguard, a blast of energy rang out, striking the ship's hull. The Vanguard groaned, and Alina felt her chest tighten with fear. They weren't going to make it, unless they fought back. Her fingers clenched around the artifact, feeling its pulse. If this was their last chance, they would use every ounce of it. The fight for humanity's survival had just begun. The Vanguard trembled as another Zithar blast struck the hull, sending sparks cascading through the ship's corridors. Alina Carter gripped the edge of the console in front of her, staring at the readouts. The ship's systems were failing one by one, and the crew was struggling to maintain control. But there was no turning back now. The artifact was in their hands, and its secrets, if they could unlock them, might be the key to humanity's survival. "Captain, we need to take off now," Lieutenant Lee urged, his voice tight with urgency. "The Zithar are closing in fast." Alina didn't need to be told twice. She turned to the helm and barked orders. "Prepare for immediate liftoff. Get us out of here." The Vanguard lurched as it pushed off the icy surface, ascending into the dark sky. Below, the Zithar's ships were already regrouping, their sleek, angular forms circling the base in a show of overwhelming superiority. The human ship, battered and damaged, was a mere speck in the vastness of the Arctic skies. But it was a speck that was holding on to a thread of hope. "All systems are online, Captain," reported the chief engineer, his voice trained. "But I don't know how long we can keep this ship intact with the Zithar on our tail." "We'll make it work," Alina replied grimly, her eyes fixed on the starry expanse ahead. "We always do." As the Vanguard accelerated, breaking through Earth's atmosphere, Alina turned her attention to the artifact. It pulsed with a strange, almost rhythmic energy, like it was waiting for something, perhaps a command, or perhaps for the right moment to reveal its true power. A comms officer's voice broke into her thoughts. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Starfleet. It's encrypted, but it's not a general broadcast. It's a direct message." "Patch it through," Alina said, feeling a surge of adrenaline. What could the Zithar want to say? The screen flickered and then displayed a sharp, angular face. The figure was reptilian, its eyes a deep shade of red, glowing with an eerie intensity. The alien's voice hissed through the speakers, a cold and calculated sound. "Humans," the creature began. "You have no future. Your planet is dead, and now you will be destroyed. Surrender the artifact immediately, or face complete annihilation." Alina's grip tightened around the armrest of her chair. The Zithar leader was confident, too confident, as if he didn't even consider the possibility that humanity might fight back. "We will never surrender," Alina replied, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "This war isn't over, not by a long shot." The Zithar commander's lips curled into something resembling a smirk. "You cannot win. You are nothing compared to the might of the Zithar Empire." With that, the screen went black, and the connection was severed. Alina leaned back in her chair, staring at the cold emptiness of space. They had no idea what they were up against. While the Vanguard continued its evasive maneuvers, a team of engineers and scientists worked feverishly to understand the artifact. It seemed to hold the key to unlocking unimaginable power, but no one could figure out how it worked. Alina knew the Zithar were watching, and she couldn't afford any mistakes. Every second counted. "We're running out of time, Captain," one of the scientists said, glancing nervously at the artifact. "If we don't figure out how to use this thing soon, the Zithar will catch up with us. And we won't survive a direct confrontation." Alina's mind raced. She could feel the weight of every decision bearing down on her. There had to be something they were missing, something about the artifact that could change the tide of the war. As the Vanguard moved further from Earth, Alina made the difficult decision to make their way to a hidden resistance base in a remote corner of the galaxy. It was their last chance, and with each passing day, the Zithar grew more relentless. But Alina wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. She stood before her crew, rallying them for the fight ahead. The Zithar think they've already won, but they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated us, and they'll pay for it. The crew cheered, their spirits lifting in the face of overwhelming odds. Alina knew they were exhausted, but she also knew that humanity had something the Zithar couldn't comprehend, a refusal to yield. As the Vanguard entered hyperspace, racing toward the unknown, Alina's thoughts turned to the future. The Zithar had underestimated humanity's resilience, and that would be their undoing. The artifact might hold the key to victory, but the real strength lay within the hearts of the people who fought for a future they refused to lose. The war was far from over, and Alina Carter was ready to lead humanity's final stand. The Vanguard cruised silently through hyperspace, the distant stars flickering like pinpricks of light in the black expanse. Inside the ship, the atmosphere was tense. The crew had been working tirelessly to decode the artifact, but despite their best efforts, they had made little progress. The energy readings were off the charts, too erratic, too foreign for anything they had seen before. Alina stood in the command center, eyes fixed on the holographic display of the ship's status. Her fingers drummed restlessly against the console, the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. They were close, so close to unlocking the secret they needed, but time was running out. The Zithar fleet wasn't going to wait forever. "Any progress?" Alina asked, turning toward the science officer, Dr. Mathis, who had been working relentlessly to understand the artifact. "Captain," Dr. Mathis replied, his voice thick with frustration, "we've run every scan we can. The artifact's energy signature is unlike anything we've encountered. It's like it's reacting to us, almost as if it's alive. But we can't trigger its function." Alina's brow furrowed. "Alive? You're saying the artifact is sentient?" "Not exactly," Dr. Mathis said, shaking his head. "But it's interacting with us in ways we don't fully understand. It's almost like it's waiting for something." Alina felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly tempered by doubt. Waiting for what? Dr. Mathis hesitated before replying. "It could be a command. A signal, maybe. Something that only we can provide." His eyes met hers, a quiet urgency behind them. "Or maybe it's waiting for us to understand something about it. We've tried everything from direct contact to energy pulses, but nothing's triggered a response." "Keep trying," Alina said, her voice firm, though her mind was racing. The crew's morale was starting to dip, and she knew they needed a breakthrough soon, or they would start to fall apart. She glanced at the display again, her eyes drawn to the image of the distant Zithar fleet, still in pursuit, their warships casting a long shadow over their escape. The tension in the room was palpable, but Alina knew that her role wasn't just to command the Vanguard. It was to keep hope alive. If she faltered, so would her crew. They had come this far, and they couldn't afford to give up now. Hours passed, and still there was no sign of progress. Alina walked the corridors of the ship, checking on her crew, offering words of encouragement where she could. But even her strongest efforts couldn't shake the growing sense of desperation in the air. They needed something, anything, to turn the tide of this war. That's when it happened. A faint hum filled the ship, barely audible at first, but growing louder, stronger. Alina's heart skipped a beat as the sound reverberated through the walls. She rushed back to the command center, where the entire crew had gathered around the artifact. It's reacting," Dr. Mathis said, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. He was standing before the artifact, hands hovering above it, as if sensing the shift in energy. Alina's pulse quickened. "What's happening?" "It's like the artifact is aligning with us," Dr. Mathis continued, his fingers brushing the surface of the orb. "We've been doing this all wrong. We were trying to force it to work. But it's not something that can be forced. It's something that has to be understood. It's responding to our intentions." As he spoke, the artifact began to pulse, a deep, resonating sound that seemed to echo from within. Its blue glow brightened, casting eerie shadows across the room. Alina could feel the power building, an immense, concentrated force that swelled inside the ship. A sudden surge of energy coursed through the Vanguard. The lights flickered, and the ship hummed as if it had come to life. Then, with a brilliant flash, the artifact released a surge of raw power, sending a shockwave through the entire ship. "Captain," Lieutenant Lee shouted, his voice full of shock. "We've got a power surge. It's coming from the artifact. It's boosting the ship's engines and weapons." Alina's eyes widened as the systems flickered back to life. The Vanguard wasn't just operational. It was stronger than ever before. The energy readings on the ship's scanners were off the charts. The artifact had somehow integrated itself with the Vanguard systems, augmenting its capabilities far beyond what human technology had ever achieved. Their once limiting defenses were now enhanced, and the ship was faster, more agile, and more powerful than it had ever been. "How is this possible?" Alina asked, astonished. "It's as if the artifact is merging with the ship," Dr. Mathis said, his voice shaking. "It's bonding with the ship's systems, giving us an immense power boost." Alina's eyes narrowed as a new realization struck her. The artifact wasn't just a weapon. It was a key to turning the tide of the war. If they could harness its full potential, the Zithar might not be able to touch them. "Set a course for the Zithar fleet," Alina commanded, her voice full of renewed purpose. "It's time to show them what humanity is capable of." The crew responded with a wave of determination. The Vanguard surged forward, its engines roaring to life, propelled by the raw energy of the artifact. For the first time in weeks, Alina felt a spark of hope flicker inside her, a fire that had been reignited. Humanity had faced extinction, but now, with the artifact at their side, they were ready to fight back. And this time, they were no longer the underdogs. This time, they had the power to win. The Vanguard tore through space, its engines roaring with newfound strength. The once damaged warship, now infused with the power of the artifact, seemed to hum with purpose. Alina stood on the bridge, her mind focused and determined. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a leader. And now, humanity had a chance to win. The Zithar fleet, still in pursuit, loomed large on the scanners. Their ships, massive and menacing, were scattered across the void, a dark wall of invincibility. But Alina wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "Captain," Lieutenant Lee called, his voice tense but filled with hope. "We've got a clear shot. The Vanguard is running at full power, and our weapons are charged. If we strike now, we might have a chance to cripple their fleet." Alina nodded, her jaw clenched. "Prepare all systems for attack. Target their flagship first. We're not just going to survive this. This is our counteroffensive." The bridge crew worked in seamless harmony, executing commands with precision. Every moment felt like an eternity, but Alina knew they couldn't hesitate. The Zithar had underestimated them, and now was the time to make them regret it. Targeting their lead ship, the weapons officer reported. Weapons locked and ready. Alina glanced at the screen. The Zithar flagship was positioned at the center of their formation, a gleaming black vessel surrounded by smaller warships. It was formidable, the heart of their fleet. If they could take it out, they might cripple the Zithar's coordination and force them into retreat. "Fire," Alina ordered, her voice cutting through the tension. A massive surge of energy burst from the Vanguard, the ship's enhanced weapons charging with the power of the artifact. The beam shot out across the void, striking the Zethar flagship with a blinding flash of light. The blast ripped through the alien vessel's shields, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. For a brief moment, Alina allowed herself to believe they had a chance. Direct hit. Their shields are down. Lieutenant Lee shouted. We've breached their hull. The Zethar flagship staggered, its energy shields flickering. For the first time since the invasion began, it was vulnerable. The alien command structure was in chaos as the flagship's systems scrambled to compensate for the damage. But Alina knew they needed to press the advantage, or the Zethar would regroup and retaliate with even greater force. Lock on with all remaining weapons, Alina ordered. Take out their propulsion system. Prevent them from fleeing. The Vanguard fired again, a relentless barrage of plasma and energy missiles that hammered the Zethar flagship. The alien ship buckled under the onslaught, its engines flaring as it lost power. It drifted, damaged and vulnerable, in the midst of the Zethar formation. Captain, their smaller ships are moving in to retaliate. The tactical officer warned. They're surrounding us. Alina's pulse quickened, but she kept her focus. The Vanguard wasn't just a ship anymore. It was humanity's last stand. Activate our defensive shields, she ordered, and brace for impact. We won't let them break through. The bridge rattled as enemy fire slammed into the Vanguard's hull. The crew held their positions, fighting against the barrage, but Alina felt a flicker of something deep inside her, a certainty that this battle would decide everything. Either humanity would rise or fall here, in the cold depths of space, surrounded by the wreckage of worlds. Shields holding, but we're taking damage on the starboard side. The engineer shouted, his voice strained. Hull integrity at 70% and falling. Alina grimaced but didn't flinch. Keep us steady. We need to keep the pressure on their flagship. As the Zethar ships closed in, Alina could see the enemy forces shifting tactics. They were desperate now, trying to rally their remaining strength. But they had made a critical error. They had underestimated human resolve. The Vanguard dodged incoming fire, weaving through the Zethar formation with unprecedented agility, thanks to the artifact's boost to its engines. Alina barked commands, guiding the ship through a series of evasive maneuvers that kept the enemy off balance. And then, a breakthrough. Captain, the tactical officer cried. We've got an opening. The Zethar flagship's propulsion system is completely disabled. They're dead in the water. Alina's heart raced. Now, Lieutenant, lock onto their command center and fire everything we've got. The Vanguard unleashed another devastating wave of firepower, this time directly targeting the Zethar flagship's command deck. The impact was catastrophic. The alien ship shuddered violently, explosions tearing through its outer layers as the core of the ship erupted in a brilliant flash of light. For a moment, everything was still. The Zethar flagship had been destroyed. Direct hit, Lieutenant Lee said breathlessly. We've taken out their command center. The rest of the fleet is in disarray. They're pulling back. Alina stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest as she watched the Zethar ships scatter, their once formidable unity now fractured. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Get us ready to pursue, Alina ordered, her voice steady. This is our chance. We're not letting them regroup. The Vanguard surged forward, its systems humming with power, and the remnants of the Zethar fleet retreated into the blackness of space. The first strike had been successful, but Alina knew they were far from finished. This was only the beginning. Humanity had struck back, and the galaxy would never be the same. Word of the Zethar flagship's destruction spread like wildfire across the stars, in hidden outposts, in underground colonies, and among shattered fleets clinging to survival. Hope flickered to life. For years, humanity had been on the run, fragmented, hunted, and broken. But now, They had struck a blow the Zethar never expected. The legend of the Vanguard ignited across the resistance like oxygen to a dying flame. Elena stood before a holographic display in the newly established war room aboard the Vanguard. Dozens of red dots blinked across the galactic map. Star outposts, patrol routes, occupied worlds. But now, for the first time in a generation, those dots were shifting. The Zethar were pulling back, consolidating. They were shaken. Behind her, a dozen resistance leaders, some in uniforms decades old, others wearing the scavenged armor of fallen comrades, watched in silence. "Let me get this straight," one of them, a grizzled admiral with a synthetic arm, said gruffly. "You crippled their flagship, with a single ship, using some alien relic." "It wasn't just the artifact," Elena replied. "It was timing, preparation, unity, and will." Her eyes scanned the room. "Something we've been missing. Until now." Another resistance leader, Commander Sura of the Europa Rebellion, stepped forward. "You've given us a chance, Carter. A real one. But if we're going to win, it can't be just the Vanguard. We need to strike everywhere, simultaneously." Elena nodded. "Then we hit them where they're weakest. We sow chaos. We take back what's ours, one world at a time." Plans formed quickly. The Vanguard, now the centerpiece of the resistance fleet, would lead a coordinated wave of attacks against key Zethar installations, mining worlds, weapon depots, relay stations. The artifact's power, while still not fully understood, gave them the edge they needed to punch through defenses that were once impenetrable. But victory wouldn't come easy. A week later, deep in orbit above the ruined world of Vexus Prime, the Vanguard led the assault. Zethar anti-orbital defenses blazed to life, filling the sky with a storm of fire. Resistance ships, long hidden and barely held together, swarmed behind the Vanguard like wolves chasing a wounded beast. Evasive maneuvers. Elena shouted as the ship rocked violently. "Keep our shields angled toward the north platform. That's where their flak is heaviest." Lieutenant Lee's fingers danced over the controls. "Copy that. Rerouting shield power now. We're breaking through." On the planet's surface, human strike teams began their insertion, deploying from drop pods that screamed through the atmosphere like falling stars. Ground teams led by resistance veterans stormed key facilities, catching the Zethar flat-footed. The aliens weren't used to resistance. They certainly weren't used to organized resistance. In the command center, Dr. Mathis monitored the artifact's output. Its energy pulsed in sync with the ship's systems, almost like it was anticipating threats, shielding them before impact, even guiding weapon targeting with uncanny precision. "This thing, it's learning," Mathis whispered. "It's adapting to us. Or maybe we're adapting to it." Elena didn't care. Whatever the truth, it was working. Hours later, the last Zethar stronghold on Vexus Prime exploded in a plume of blue fire. Cheers erupted across the comms. Another world liberated. Another foothold gained. But Elena didn't celebrate. She stared out the viewport at the burning horizon of Vexus, jaw set. This is only the beginning. They thought humanity would lie down and die. She turned to her crew, eyes blazing. They were wrong. And somewhere, deep in Zethar space, their high command had begun to realize it too. The humans were no longer prey. They were a rising storm. The galaxy began to shift. From the scorched mining fields of Titan's Drift to the misty jungles of Alcara Prime, human resistance forces emerged from the shadows. The Zethar, once masters of swift and total domination, were now trapped in a war of attrition, a war they were unprepared for. And at the center of it all, the Vanguard, humanity's first and only artifact-enhanced warship, cut through enemy lines like a blade through silk. Inside the ship's main strategy chamber, Elena Carter stood surrounded by commanders from every corner of human space. Old grudges were buried. Political divides dissolved. Now there was only the mission, survival, and victory. "We've done what they thought was impossible," Elena said, her voice clear and commanding. "We've crippled their command. We've liberated entire systems, but the Zithar still control their central nexus, HFY. A collective hush fell over the room at the mention of it. HFY, the Zithar's capital of conquest, fortress world, nerve center, the crown jewel of their brutal empire. If we take HFY, she continued, we don't just win a battle, we end the war." General Barlow, once commander of Earth's last orbital defense ring, leaned forward. "You're talking about a direct assault on the most fortified planet in the sector. They'll be waiting for us." "They've been waiting," Commander Sura added, "since the moment we struck their flagship. But they're scattered. We've bled them. Their unity is fractured." "And the artifact?" Barlow asked. "Can it really get us through those defenses?" Dr. Mathis, who had become the closest thing to the artifact's translator, stepped forward. "It's evolving, integrating more deeply with the Vanguard than we ever predicted. Our systems are now reacting at quantum speeds, targeting, shielding, propulsion. It's not just helping us fight." He hesitated. "It's helping us think, strategize." Alina let that hang for a moment. "Then we use it." She turned back to the holographic display. HFY glowed like a red ember, surrounded by hostile fleets and orbital platforms. But it didn't feel impossible anymore. Not with everything they'd learned. The assault began 3 days later. A coordinated fleet, dozens of resistance ships, retrofitted and hardened, jumped into the HFY system in a sudden synchronized wave. The Zithar fleet rose to meet them in force. Massive cruisers unleashed barrage after barrage, while orbital defenses lit up space with particle fire. And yet, the Vanguard dove into the heart of it, untouched. Elena sat in the command chair, calm and focused. The artifact's energy surged like a pulse through the ship. Shields flared precisely when needed, and weapons cut with scalpel-like precision. "They're trying to box us in," Lieutenant Lee called out. "Let them try," Elena said. Full spread, burst forward, split their line. The ship exploded through the blockade like a comet, sending shockwaves through the enemy ranks. Behind them, resistance fighters poured through the gap, landing on HFY's surface in coordinated waves. Fighting was fierce. The Zithar deployed shock troops and automated defense walkers, but the humans were more than soldiers now. They were believers. Believers in their cause, their leaders, and in their ability to win. From orbit, Elena watched as her people advanced street by street. The planet was turning into a war zone. But the momentum was theirs. Dr. Mathis stepped up beside her. "The artifact, it's responding to the planet. There's something down there, something old, buried beneath their capital." Elena narrowed her eyes. "Then that's where we go next. Because if the artifact had a secret, it was waiting on HFY. And the final reckoning was near. The skies above HFY were choked with fire and ash. Wreckage of Zithar warships drifted in slow, burning orbits. The resistance fleet, bloody but unbroken, held the upper atmosphere. On the ground, every street, tower, and bunker became a battleground. The Zithar fought like cornered beasts, their once supreme arrogance shattered by the sheer ferocity of the human offensive. But victory was still uncertain. Elena Carter, flanked by her core team and an elite strike unit, descended into the catacombs beneath the Zithar capital. The artifact pulsed in her hand, glowing brighter the deeper they went. This place, this ancient vault buried beneath the city, was older than the Zithar themselves. "The signal is strongest here," Dr. Mathis whispered, scanning the walls, which were covered in symbols matching those on the artifact. This planet wasn't just a fortress. It was built on top of something ancient. A deep hum resonated from the floor. The chamber opened into a colossal underground space, an ancient control nexus, its architecture alien, even to the Zithar. At the center stood a crystalline obelisk, suspended in the air, identical in design to the artifact. The moment Elena stepped forward, the device in her hand responded, rising from her palm and floating toward the structure. Suddenly, holographic projections flared to life. A long-dead race, the true creators of the artifact, appeared in ghostly light. Tall, elegant beings with 6 eyes and minds that transcended matter. They spoke not in words, but through a flood of emotion and vision. They had foreseen the rise of empires and their collapse. The artifact was not a weapon. It was a test, a gift of potential, meant only for a species that could survive, adapt, and rise in the face of extinction. Humanity, Dr. Mathis gasped, eyes wide. We passed. The crystal pulsed, and in that moment, the artifact unleashed its final surge. Across HFY, star technology failed. Their walkers seized up, their ships powered down. Even their soldiers, genetically augmented and cybernetically enhanced, collapsed as their systems overloaded. Above the surface, the Vanguard broadcast the signal. The Zithar fleet, now in disarray, scattered. Without central coordination, they became prey for the very resistance they once hunted. On the ground, human forces surged forward. What had been a desperate siege turned into liberation. Cheers erupted as flags were raised, not of nations, but of a united Earth. Hours later, Elena stood at the summit of the Zithar capital tower, overlooking the smoldering world. Ash rained like snow, and the sky was painted with the glow of a new dawn. This is the end, Mathis said quietly. Elena shook her head. No, this is the beginning. From the ruins of near extinction, humanity had forged its greatest victory. Not just through fire and steel, but through unity, resolve, and the belief that no fate was sealed. The Zithar Empire had fallen, and in its place, a new power stood tall. Humanity, victorious. In the face of extinction, they fought back, and won.